Table 1 is a list of the apocryphal pieces extant as of 1927, mentioned by writers in the first 4 centuries of the Common Era, with the several works wherein they are cited are noticed, and we don't need to list all the abbreviated, because they did a lot of abbreviation names. So we have the Acts of Andrew, some books under the name of Andrew, the Gospel of Andrew, a Gospel under the name of Apelles, the Gospel according to the 12 Apostles, the Gospel of Barnabas, the writings of Bartholomew, the Gospel of Bartholomew, the Gospel of Basilides, the Gospel of Cerinthus, the Revelation of Cerinthus, an Epistle of Christ to Peter and Paul, some other books under the name of Christ, an Epistle of Christ produced by the Manichees, a hymn which Christ taught his disciples, the Gospel according to the Egyptians, the Acts of the Apostles, the Gospel of the Ebionites, the Gospel of the Encratites, the Gospel of Eve, the Gospel according to the Hebrews, the Book of Helkesites, the Gospels of Hesychius, the Book of James, some books published under the name of James, the Acts of John, books under the name of John, Gospel under the name of Jude, Gospel under the name of Judas Iscariot, the Acts of the Apostles by Lucius, the Acts of the Apostles by Lentitus, the books of Lentitius, the Acts under the Apostles, named by Leontius, Acts of the Apostles by Leuthon, the Gospels published by Lucianus, the Acts of the Apostles used by the Manichees, the Gospel of Marcion, the books under the name of Matthew, the Gospel of Matthias, the Traditions of Matthias, a book under the name of Matthias, the Gospel of Merinthus, the Gospel according to the Nazarenes, the Acts of the Apostle, the Acts of Paul and Thecla, the Acts of Paul, the Preaching of Paul and Peter, a book under the name of Paul, the Revelation of Paul, the Gospel of Perfection, the Acts of Peter, the Doctrines of Peter, the Gospel of Peter, the Judgment of Peter, the Preaching of Peter, the Revelation of Peter, some books under the name of Peter, the Acts of Philip, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Scythianus, the Acts of the Apostles by Seleucus, the Revelation of Stephen, the Gospel of Titan, the Gospel of Thaddeus, the Catholic Epistle of Themison, the Montanist, the Acts of Thomas, the Gospel of Thomas, some books under the name of Thomas, the Gospel of Truth, the Gospel of Valentinus,